Context can make or break a product, and in an industry where the average turnaround time is about 3 to 5 years, that's a lot of cultural talking points, trends, news cycles, etc. to come and go. At launch then, it's almost pot luck whether your game lands in the same reality it started development in, leading to all sorts of last-minute changes or bigger overhauls to make things work. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games changed after real-world events. Number 10. Spider-Man 2 Enter ELECTRO, the World Trade Center Battle. Many videos have covered the overall impact of 9/11 on video games, including our own piece from 2019, but the sequel to Spider-Man's incredible game on PlayStation 1 originally featured a level on top of the World Trade Center. Titular villain ELECTRO would scream about dancing with the gods before using the iconic spire of the building as a lightning rod to power him up. Obviously, this wasn't ideal for the development team nor the game's marketing, given that the Twin Towers had already appeared in some marketing materials, and still featured in some capacity in some regions' releases of the game. Later versions of Enter ELECTRO would remove the World Trade Center entirely, with the final fight taking place atop two generic skyscrapers instead. Interestingly, it's not the first time Spider-Man would have to remove Twin Towers related imagery either. The teaser trailer for the original 2002 movie featured Spider-Man catching a helicopter full of criminals and pulling it back into a web suspended between the towers themselves. Number 9. Little Big Planet, Quran quotes. Little Big Planet definitely isn't the first game you'd expect to cause an uproar, but a significant controversy did come from a development team oversight. In the level Swinging Safari, the level actually contains Arabic vocals, which translate to "Every soul shall have the taste of death, all that is on earth will perish." Yikes. Not what you'd expect from a PEGI 3 rated game. And yet the content of the lyrics wasn't the biggest issue. These are actually words taken directly from Islamic religious texts, the Quran. Given how religious prejudices against the Islamic faith were still very much charged around 2008 though, this was taken as an insult, with one gamer noting, "We Muslims consider the mixing of music and words from our holy Quran deeply offending." As a gesture of good faith and with urgency, the song Tafa Niang was immediately altered to an instrumental only version. Number 8. Bully, a dog-eat-dog country. 2005 saw UK tabloid The Sun label Rockstar's Bully Grand Theft Auto for kids, despite not having actually played it. It was around this time that anti-bullying campaigns were gaining traction in the UK too, with Labour MP Keith Vaz naming the unreleased game in Parliament to the Prime Minister directly, asking if a game which glorified bullying should really be sold in the country. Clearly, this query gained traction, as Rockstar felt the pressure to back down on the game's name from numerous forceful campaigners, ironically bullying them into submission. As such, the game would release in the UK as Canis Canem Edit, Latin for dog eat dog, a mixed blessing marketing move that probably pleased highbrow Eton students and confused the rest of us until we had a Google. Ostensibly, retailers would still refer to it as Bully in all but official marketing materials, in order to help people locate the game they'd heard so much about beforehand. To this day, literally everyone still calls Bully, Bully. Number 7. Fallout 3, the Power of the Atom. Fallout 3 is widely regarded to be a real high point for the series. It brought the game into the third dimension, introduced the VATS mechanic, and allowed for multiple styles of play, opening the IP up to millions of new fans. However, its reception was not as positive in one country in particular, Japan. And if you look to the content in question, it's not difficult to see why. In the mission, The Power of the Atom, the player is asked if they'll activate a mini nuclear weapon to devastate the town of Megaton, which is situated precariously around it. This in itself wouldn't be too insensitive in a gaming context. Seriously, we gamers do some crazy stuff in games. However, given that the mini nuke in the game is referred to as Fat Man, which was the name of the nuclear weapon detonated over Nagasaki in 1945, killing thousands of civilians, the mission suddenly takes on a darker, more insensitive tone. Given the clear reference to the event, the entire mission was removed from the Japanese version of the game, and the Fat Man was renamed the Nuka Launcher. Number 6. Command & Conquer Generals, Operation Iraq Freedom. Sometimes a little bit of lost time can lead to a cascading Monkey Island-like sequence of events that could have been prevented at the start if things were a little bit tighter. This is what occurred when Danger Close, Aspire, and EA had to delay Command & Conquer Generals briefly, only for it to release just before a critical US attack in Iraq. As part of Operation Enduring Freedom, the USA's campaign in Afghanistan to combat the Taliban, the USA would actually mimic some quite prophetic tactics used in the game. Due to already having been delayed, Command & Conquer Generals would release as normal in most regions. Some, though, such as Germany, found the disturbing mirroring of real-life events too much, and asked for fictitious army names to replace the real ones found in the game. China banned it outright for featuring a hostile Chinese force that they considered a smear on our national image. Strangely enough, this wouldn't be the first time Command & Conquer prophesied calamity. Red Alert 2 featured an advertisement for the World Trade Center being attacked by aeroplanes 1 year and 1 month before 9/11 itself. Number 5. Fire Emblem Fates. One hell of a drug. Fire Emblem really can't catch a break when it comes to controversy. The series repeatedly came under scrutiny for seemingly only acknowledging heterosexual relationships, with 3 houses appearing to only make brief allusions to the possibility that people of the same sex can actually feel. Fire Emblem Fates then finally acknowledged that gay relationships do exist, but it was 1 step forward, 2 steps back. In Fates, the Japanese version of the game had a pretty insidious scene where if you're a male character and you're paired with the openly lesbian Soleil, you'll spike her drink with a drug that makes her fall in love with men, so that you can trick her into falling for you. When the drug finally wears off, she'll note she saw you as female, fell in love, and still finds you attractive, despite the illusion disappearing. Given that the gay rights movement, particularly in the United States, was pushing hard for more parity of media exposure and acceptance across 2015, the scene was considered to quite literally be gay conversion therapy, and to delete years of progress. The scene was later removed for Western audiences. Number 4. Grand Theft Auto 3. Darkel, the Revolutionary. At the time of 9/11, yes, another entry on 9/11, there are just so many games and situations attached to it. Rockstar were working on Grand Theft Auto 3, the game that would catapult the series into the 3rd dimension and take the gaming world by storm. Up until the tragic destruction of the Twin Towers though, that game was about to include a controversial side character called Darkel. Though details are limited, Darkel's character was said to have been a radical and seeking a terrorist-like uprising, which Clyde/U would then help him achieve. Quite how in-depth or lengthy this portion of the game would have been is unknown, but clearly the danger of being too insensitive or close to real-world events was enough to can the character entirely. Number 3. Football Manager 2005. Tibet is free? Given that Football Manager is basically a Microsoft Excel mod, it's quite something to conceive of it being a controversial product. Unless you're China and there's a Tibetan flag in sight. China has held a long-standing belief that Tibet is, for all intents and purposes, a territory of China. Therefore, Football Manager's inclusion of Tibet as its own region was seen as an insult to the country. As a result, the game was banned from sale permanently, or until Sega chose to remove Tibet, as well as Taiwan, which China refuses to recognize as independent from the roster, due to them having created content harmful to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Sega had no option sales-wise but to respond with a special Chinese version, with Tibet and Taiwan now as part of China, but the free Tibet edition, a tongue-in-cheek bootleg, would end up being sold in high volumes by pirates all over the country. Number 2. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Navigating a minefield. Though it's nothing more than a coincidence that both the 9/11 attacks and the terrorist plot of Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty occurred in New York City, the uncomfortably close timing of the game's release made many uneasy to play something that featured content and themes so raw in their minds. Many pieces of key art and promotional materials would have the World Trade Center removed so as to avoid offense, and a pivotal end scene featuring the Arsenal Gear mech attacking Manhattan was removed entirely. The ultimate irony, of course, was that Metal Gear Solid 2's original setting for its terrorist attack was intended to be the Middle East, which the writers believed would have been too close for comfort due to the turbulent situation there at the time. It was later altered to New York, a poor setting for avoiding controversy thereafter, given what would occur. However, these sub-themes of surveillance and data collection would later lightning strike into relevance later on, as the post-9/11 race to increase security ended up giving the US government carte blanche to invade the most intimate parts of its people's privacies, with some news networks reporting human rights violations in the name of national security, an idea that Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots would then later focus on throughout. As if all of this wasn't stranger than fiction enough, Kojima Productions had to change the katakana of Raiden, the maligned protagonist of Metal Gear Solid 2, into kanji, as the katakana could be read as Laden. And number 1, almost everything. COVID-19. Despite the gaming industry being slightly more hardy and resilient than other mediums because we collectively gamed our asses off across the lockdown, it was still hit by a swath of game and event cancellations, delays, and even studio closures thanks to the coronavirus. Tokyo Game Show, Gamescom, PAX, and BlizzCon were amongst the events COVID saw removed from activity, and tons of games including The Last of Us Part 2, Halo Infinite, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Battlefield 2042, Dying Light 2, The Lord of the Rings Gollum, Cyberpunk 2077's DLC, and more were delayed significantly. Deliver Us to the Moon for Nintendo Switch and Minecraft Earth were cancelled outright, and Rainbow Six Quarantine had its name changed to Rainbow Six Extraction. UK-based CEX would shut down all of its corporate stores indefinitely as sales of strategy game Plague Inc. shot up 123%. To this day, we're still dealing with the fallout of the pandemic on development, fandoms, and the general running of the industry. But here's to 2023 being when the generation will finally find its footing. And those are just 10 instances of video games being changed because of real-world events. Let me know your favorites down in the comments below, and please subscribe to the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. You can also submit your questions to myself and Jules every Thursday for the Entitled Banter podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.